Part of having a rich, full life means that it's going to be messy. Words of wisdom from Samantha Ettus. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I interview inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and their lessons to help you take your business and your life to the next level and create something sexy. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 287 of the Support is Sexy podcast. Happy to have you here because it just would not be the same without you. And on today's episode of the Support is Sexy Rewind, we have Samantha Ettus, author of The Pie Life and a media personality, who encourages us as women to be unafraid to divide the pie. Now, if you're an Erykah Badu fan, this does not mean what you think. Samantha is talking about living what she calls the pie life, which is a technique really that allows business women to work, live, and manage their lives in a way that is delicious, fulfilling, and best of all, as we said in the intro, messy. All right, so here's Samantha Ettus. Here we go. So Samantha, thank you so much for being here for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. So first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
Well, I think that I've always been a little bit dance the beat of my own drum. And I think that that is something I love about entrepreneurs is that you're never happy being put in a box and you always are questioning the way things are done and how they could be done differently in the future. But my first really sort of serious foray into entrepreneurship came when I graduated from Harvard Business School. And it was 2001. And I got this idea to start a company that was a personal branding firm. And so I launched that, and the rest is history.
What brought about the idea to launch a personal branding firm? Was it something that you were experiencing at the time, something you were studying at the time?
Well, my background before business school, I'd worked in Hollywood for a couple years, and I'd also worked in magazine publishing, and then I'd worked at Blue's Clues, a show on Nickelodeon. Mm-hmm. And I always felt like, was always fascinated by certain people who I would say have a spark beyond their job title. And this came even sort of more to fruition when I was at Harvard Business School. We had so many CEOs come speak to us, but so few of them were charismatic and had that spark. And I wondered how those few people, how they managed their careers, how they decided where to speak, which boards to go on, how to manage their profiles and their brands. And I tried to apply what I knew from my days in Hollywood and create the first ever talent agency for personality-driven brands and CEOs.
Now, how important is it for all of us to discover that spark in ourselves?
I think we all have it, and we just need to see what lights it on fire. So some people who've been in the same job forever, in the same relationship, a lot of people fall into ruts. And it's really easy to get caught in a continuous plateau where you're just not growing and not learning. And I think it's really easy to look through a room and see who has that spark in them and who doesn't. And it doesn't mean that those without a spark today can't have one tomorrow. It just means that they need to have the will and the way to light themselves in a certain direction that would make them passionate and engaged in what they're doing.
Excellent. Now, where did you grow up, Samantha?
I grew up in New York City.
Oh, you're a New York girl like me. Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
What was a young Samantha like?
Well, I had a very unusual childhood because I was a competitive tennis player. So from a very young age, I had a job. I played tennis every day from the age of 9 until 20. And so I would get as I got older, I arranged for all my classes to be compacted, got out of school at 1 p.m., would drive an hour to play tennis out in Long Island where a lot of the good players were, play for a few hours, come home, have dinner, do my homework for hours, and then go to sleep. And so, I would be in school, people would be thinking about what party was happening that weekend, and I would be thinking about who I was going to play and thinking about my match and how I would win. And I just had a very different childhood than the people around me. So I always felt like I missed out on a lot of things on the way to adulthood, but then I also learned other things.
Who were some of your greatest influences growing up?
Well, my parents definitely made me feel like I could do anything I set my mind to with hard work. And I think that's something that we sometimes forget as parents, that our number one job is to help our children realize their potential. And the way to do that is to really instill in them a belief that they could be anything they set their minds to. And when I've interviewed a lot of renowned people, the one thing they have in common is that they had people, adults in their life when they were kids that made them feel they could accomplish anything. And so that influence was huge. And then my mom was a very big feminist. And so that also was a big influence. In my new book, I share a story that's a pretty crass story. But essentially when I think it was 8 years old, my mom and I were in the elevator of our apartment building, and we got out, and she said, "Do you see Mrs. So-and-so?" And I said, "Of course." And she said, "She hates her husband, but she can never leave him because she has no money of her own." Mm. And so that's obviously a very crass delivery for a kid.
But I'm sure it made an impact.
It did make an impact. And I think that from a young age, I just thought it was super important for women to have their own careers and their own identities and their own financial means.
Even, would you say, within a relationship? Because you're not saying, obviously you're in a relationship, you're married, and you have your children. So would you say even in a relationship, women should still have their own?
Oh, even more so, right? Because you can get caught up in thinking that you're protected or that you have this safety net and that everything is one. But unfortunately, in more than 50% of cases, something unexpected happens, whether it's an illness or a divorce or anything. And it's really important that you're protected financially should something unexpected happen. But then there's the whole other part of this, which is the fulfillment aspect. And we've gotten to this place where sometimes we think that women, once they have children, have no need for goals of their own. And in working with thousands of women, I can tell you that the most fulfilled among us are those that are involved in multiple areas of their lives, including their career. Mm-hmm. We all thrive when we have goals, and a lot of those are professional goals.
Now, speaking of career, you are certainly a career expert. You've been all over television talking about career and giving career advice, and a bestseller of five best-selling books, right? Is it 5?
Yes, I just
5 so far. And you just did a new one, right? That's right. So would you say then, in speaking about career and enjoying these different areas of our life, work-life balance is something that is debatable, or something that people debate a lot, I should say. I shouldn't say it's debatable. It's something people debate a lot. But what do you think? Is it possible? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, I think it's all about how you manage your life. Mm-hmm. And so we need to change the entire discussion away from work-life balance. I even have to call myself a work-life balance expert because that's the one term we all gather around, so it makes sense to people. But what I believe in is this totally different method, which is that you have a pie, and we all have all of the ingredients we need to have a very fulfilling life. We just need to shake up the recipe sometimes. And that means that you will be involved in 6 or 7 areas of your life. And those include your health and your partner or your quest to find one, your hobbies, your community, your friends, your career, and kids if you have them. That's the 7th slice. So some people might have a full life without kids, and some have kids. And it's really important to make goals for each of those slices. And when you do, that's a really comprehensive, engaging, and fulfilling way to live your life and structure your life. And what happens is that when we get caught up in thinking it's all work, or it's all momming, or it's all, one of these things, then our lives become woefully imbalanced. And that's when we really struggle with how to blend our personal and professional lives. But even the term work-life balance is problematic because for a scale to be in balance, you have to spend equal time at work and at home. And if you have a real career, you're not able to do that. So you're immediately set up for failure. So I like to think of it as work-life management, how you're managing your life.
I love that. And I love the visual of the scale, because I always tell people too, when you talk about balance, I think of someone on a tightrope, and it's never just even. Sometimes they're going heavier on one side, heavier on the other, but it's to find that balance.
Exactly. I like that.
Yeah. So now speaking about dividing your life up as a pie, your latest book, The Pie Life, a guilt-free recipe for success and satisfaction. And you talk about just how women can divide their lives up in different ways, or really explore or enjoy all of these different areas of our life. But tell us what exactly the pie life is.
Yeah, so when I first got into this field, I guess it was 6 years ago that I started focusing exclusively on work and life and figuring out how women could manage their personal and professional lives to greater success and happiness. And what I found when I dug into the research is that we have no frameworks that are healthy. So we just talked about the scale and why that doesn't work. And then we talk about juggling, but anyone who's ever had a conference call with a baby or a pet in the room knows that's not possible.
Right.
And then we talk about having it all, but we can't even point to anyone who has it all. So we really have no frameworks that are healthy. We're just set up to fail with all of these media-fed frameworks. And so when you think of your life as a pie, it immediately sets you up for success, because even if something is a sliver today in terms of your time, just by having it and acknowledging it on your pie suddenly makes it come alive. And so the idea is not to beat yourself up on how much time you're spending in each slice. And as women, we tend to do that. We'll say, oh my gosh, I should be spending more time with my kids, or I should be spending more time with my husband. I should be spending more time with my job. We're constantly beating ourselves up based on time. But at the end of the day, we're probably pretty rational about how we're spending our time. If you spent any less time with your sick mother, you couldn't do that. Or you couldn't spend any less time at work and be successful. So instead of beating yourself up on time, it's about making a goal for each slice of your life, and then looking at your success and evaluating your success based on how you're reaching those goals. And the goals are very specific. If you want to be in a relationship this year, it's not about saying meet someone, because someone's not going to fall on your windshield tomorrow on the way to work. It's instead about saying, okay, I'm going to put up an online profile. I'm going to go on 1 date a week. It's very specific goals for each of these slices. And that's how you manage your life. And, the one thing that is not included in the pie is guilt. I really see that as an extraneous ingredient. And in this book, The Pie Life, I interviewed over 150 successful women in all different fields, ranging from Shonda Rhimes to Gayle King and Sally Krawcheck. And one thing that they all had in common is that they spend almost no time feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that you've mentioned too in the past, and talking to people like Shonda Rhimes, and you've also cited Sarah Blakely, this idea of making sure that you create a space for the balance, or create an environment, I should say, for the balance within your business, since we're speaking to entrepreneurs. Can you talk a little bit about how we can do that? Create a space so that everyone else understands that balance is as important as it is to you as it should be to the company?
Yeah, so we used to live in a world that was very much 9 to 5. And so in that time, we could count on our companies to set our boundaries for us. I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur. He and my mom shared a market research company that he started. And they would literally leave work at 5 o'clock every day, and there was no such thing as email or, cell phones. And so they would go back to work at 9 o'clock the next day. Now, today, if you left work at 5, never checked an email, were unreachable until 9 the next day, you might have lost your job in the meantime. Mm-hmm. Your industry might have changed. So we really can't do that. The lines between work and personal lives have completely blurred. So it's up to us to set those boundaries. We can't expect our companies or our teams to do that for us. It's up to us. So I always encourage entrepreneurs, especially, to act like they live by a train schedule, to say from, whatever it takes to get your work done, whether it's 8 hours a day or 4 hours a day or 12 hours a day, set specific hours to do it, or else you'll watch every single hour become a work hour. And that's not fair to the loved ones in your life, and it's not fair to yourself. Everyone needs to turn off at some point, and it's not just when your head hits the pillow.
That's right. And tell us about a few of the tips that I heard you mention that I just love within this latest book. You talk about how we can sort of create these different spaces, like you just mentioned, that idea, but also you talk about the magic hour.
Yes, and today actually my daughter's destroyed my magic hour. Kudos to her. My 9-year-old daughter has started a new thing where she sets her alarm at 6:30, so a full hour and 15 minutes before we have to leave the house.
Oh my goodness.
She comes into my room and she's ready. She's dressed for school and she's like, "Mommy, can you make me eggs?" And I used to use that. Half of that was my magic hour. So the magic hour is what I call the 1 hour between the first person in your house waking up and you waking up. So you want to wake up an hour before your earliest riser, whether that's a baby, a dog, a child, your spouse. And that hour is yours. You can get dressed at a leisurely pace. You can work out if you want to. You can check email. You can have a cup of coffee, whatever it is that sets your morning in motion in a positive way. That way, when the next member of your house wakes up, you're ready to hit the ground running and you've already had your time to yourself and you're already feeling organized. But once your child becomes your alarm clock or someone in your house becomes your alarm clock, it's really hard to ever feel like you take control of the day. The day suddenly starts controlling you.
And some people would think that they want to sleep in until the last minute. And like you said, the day ends up controlling you because you're not starting the day off in your own way. Right.
We all, it's like entering a party that's already full, versus seeing the room fill up. It's really, there's something very rewarding about feeling like you're the first one up, you're ready for the day, you're just prepared. And so many unexpected things go on in our morning routines, and the more prepared we are to handle them, the easier it is to get through them.
And then talk to us also about something you mentioned called the Golden Triangle, which is another tool that you've mentioned in your book.
Yeah, so if you have children, you want to be doing all of your errands within the 3 points between your office, your home, and your child's school. That means your gym, your hair salon, your doctor's appointments. As many of those things as possible should take place within those 3 points. If you don't have kids, you want to do it within the golden line, which is the 2 points between your office and home. And the reason that's so critical is because we see so much time lost when we fall in love with a dentist 45 minutes away, or a chiropractor an hour away, or a hair colorist that we can't live without that's a half hour away. Those are the kinds of things, they're really small things, it seems, at the time. But when you look back at the entire month, you realize that you might have spent 6 hours commuting to your favorite salon, or an extra, hour a week going to a supermarket that's not near you. These are things that are just really easy ways to get back time in your life. And I think one of the pushbacks I sometimes get with the Pie Life method is women will say to me, "I barely have time for the 3 slices I'm involved in. How am I going to add 4 more?"
Right.
And so I feel compelled to help women get more time in their life. And one of the ways is just some of these sort of time-saving tricks that I have in my book. And they're really easy to implement and they're really small. But I give the example of the olive. American Airlines once saved $40,000 a year by eliminating 1 olive from every tray in first class. And I like to think of time that way. They're really, really small changes can yield big results.
And I think it's important the way that you described it is in looking at the areas or seeing just how much time you're wasting. Sometimes when we're just thinking, oh, I can't do that, there's no way I can, change this. But then you add up and you see, actually, you're wasting 6 hours a week. Then it becomes real for people.
Absolutely. It's very quantifiable, our time, in terms of how we're spending it. And the other thing that we do is we're constantly checking our phones, especially entrepreneurs, over the course of the day. So we're with our kids at dinner and we have our phone on. These are the small ways that really get, they just inject a lot of negativity into our relationships. And so if you're only spending an hour and a half a day with your child, you want to make it as valuable as possible. And you can be as attentive a parent as someone who's spending 10 hours a day with their kid, but distracted by their phone all day. Mm-hmm. So if you spend an hour and a half with your phone off, just focusing on your child, that's so much more valuable than an entire day with a kid where you're half distracted the whole time. And it's the same thing with our relationships. If you're at dinner with a friend, just the presence of a phone on the table is going to completely change the course of conversation.
Right.
If you put that phone away and completely focus on the person you're at dinner with, they feel your energy and that connectedness, and that's how you use your time really wisely.
That's so true. And I think I always laugh when people put their phone on the table, but they turn it upside down. Sort of like, I have this here, but I'm not really paying attention, but I just have it on the table. It's sort of like, no, it's still there. It's it's okay. I usually like to say when I get together with friends, we all look one last time before we put it away, and then that's it. And then you be present, kind of give you a last look and then put it away.
I love that.
Now, another thing that you speak about, Samantha, is being an advocate for women to work. Even if you're a stay-at-home mom, and I know there's been some controversy around that sort of idea, but can you talk to us a little bit about what you think the importance of women working is?
Yeah, so as we discussed earlier, it's really important to have something of your own that's your identity. So there's two components of this. One is the financial component of just the statistical reality is very scary. So I don't want to alarm people, but I do want to share the reality. Mm-hmm. So what we tend to do is when we see someone that's pregnant, we'll look at them and we'll say, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? Are you going to work or are you going to stay home with your kids? And as soon as we do that, we do two things. One is we inject guilt into their decision making as though there is a decision, right? Because that's that moment that we start this indecision and this self-doubt. And the second thing we do is we're selling them on a myth. And the myth is that you have a choice. You can get back in the workforce whenever you want. You can leave whenever you want. Now, after researching this, what I found is that if you leave the workforce for just 1 year, you lose 18% of your future earnings forever. If you leave the workforce for 3 years, you lose 38% of your future earnings forever. Now, beyond that, 90% of women who leave and take time off to raise kids want to go back to work, and only 40% will ever again find a full-time position. So the odds of getting back to work after time off are less than the toss of a coin.
Wow.
And so that's the reality that women need to know about. It's really not our choice. As soon as we leave the workforce, we end up with very few choices. And so the more I can help women manage their lives through those really difficult baby years, those first 5 years are very manual labor intensive, they're sleepless, and they're hard. And so if you can just keep up your career during that time, you are a winner. If you can keep your foot in the door, because before you know it, your child's in kindergarten and they're spending a full day at school. I was giving a speech at the 92nd Street Y a couple of months ago, and a woman came over to me and she said, in my community, a lot of women don't work. It's an affluent community. And moms used to say to me, oh, I feel so sorry that you have to miss everything. You're missing another performance. You're not at school like we are. She said those same women will come over to her today, now that her kids are teenagers, and they say, we are so jealous that you have a career. I wish I could do something.
Right, because they've been out of the working force for so long.
Yeah, and no one wants to hire them. And they also, they very universally, when you've been out of the workforce for a long time, you become crippled with a lack of confidence. Because if your kids are your job, it's really tricky because eventually you're going to be fired from that job because your goal as a parent is to raise people that fly away from you. And the better job you do, the further they fly. Mm-hmm. And so that's very antithetical to you wanting to keep them in the nest because that's your identity.
And not even, I feel like now being out of the workforce for years will certainly, could certainly hurt you. But now it's like a year because things change so fast depending on your industry. If you're away from it for a year, you could be so far. Sorry?
You can become a dinosaur really quickly, right?
It's even faster now. That's right. So for women listening who either maybe stay-at-home moms or maybe sort of facing, I love that you mentioned that when people sort of guilt you, whether knowingly or not, into feeling like, oh, you have to do either or, what are some tips that you have for women who want to figure out, okay, how do I stay in the workforce if I'm about to have a baby or I have young children and, that kind of thing? Because you're not talking about maternity leave. You're talking about women who choose to take themselves out of the workforce completely.
Right. So it's like if we can reach women before they make that choice, let's do that.
Right.
But let's say you've already made that choice and circumstantially or whatever, you are not in the workforce. The quicker you get back, the easier it will be. And so start today trying to get back in. And the best way to do that is through networking and through sharing your story. So one of the mistakes I see a lot of women make is you'll be at the playground or you'll be at coffee and you'll say to someone, so what do you do? And they say, oh, I'm home with the kids. Well, that ends the conversation really quickly. And there's so many other ways to say that, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things you could say is, well, I was in marketing for 10 years, and for the last 3 years, I've been home with my kids. That creates a completely different picture of who you are. So that when it's time to go back, that person immediately still sees you as a marketing professional. And it opens up conversations rather than closes them. So you are your history. And part of your history was your career that you used to have. And so you want to incorporate that into every conversation. Whether you've been out for 1 month or 10 years, you always want to include that history. I was an accountant for years, and I still have a passion for accounting, but now I've been home with my kids for the last 5 years before I go back to accounting. So that's an easier story for people then to help you and say, oh, that's so funny, my sister runs an accounting firm. Or, right. Oh, I'll see if I hear of anything. That's the best way you can do is start spreading the news that you're looking and really share what your history is. That's one thing, is nailing your story. Then once you land an interview, it's really important that you take away the fear an employer has of hiring someone who's been out of the workforce. So you want to use language like, I really miss working and I can't wait to get back. Or, no, you'll never meet a harder worker than I am. Those are the kinds of things that alleviate an employer's fear about hiring you.
And then to reminding them, or not reminding them, sort of figuring out a way to express to them the work that you have done. Do you think that's another way too, to mention, when I worked at such and such, I did X?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do hear a lot of career counselors telling stay-at-home moms to talk about how much their work as a stay-at-home mom relates to a career. That is complete garbage. Right.
Thank you for saying that. I was always wondering, because people say, oh, I have to juggle as a mom. And not to diminish that, certainly you do. But would an employer say, okay, great?
The bottom line is, at the end of the day, most employers will not give you credit for that. And if anything, they'll penalize you for that. I think it's way better to say, I was the best performing salesperson on my team, and I love sales, and I love the daily goals, and I cannot wait to dig my teeth in again. That's going to make them hire you, right? Mm-hmm. But trying to compare what you do as a mom to work is just not the case. I mean, every single person who's a working mom is just as much a mom as a stay-at-home mom. They do all the same things, just in less time, and maybe with different resources, and and they're spending less time on it just because of their schedules. But all of those things that you do as a parent are important, but to say that they apply directly, it's a tough sell, and it just kind of solidifies and reminds the employer that that's what you've been doing, is being a mom. I think it's far better to talk about your experience and your expertise that relates to the profession.
Absolutely. I think in both cases, I love what you said. It's sort of like just making sure that you control the narrative. That's something that I always say.
Exactly.
Controlling your narrative on the playground or in the interview. Because even on the playground, I think, and let me know what you think, would you say that for women who have, maybe you've been out of, say, marketing for a while, and what you're looking at doing next is a different industry, you could even say then, oh, I used to do this in marketing, and now I'm looking forward to X. That still could help someone sort of have you in mind for other positions.
Absolutely. If you are in an airplane next to someone, if you're at a baby shower, or you're at work, all of these people around you are potential networking opportunities. And so you want to have the same story in all of those places. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that they should only talk about work at work. But that's not how the world works. And men have known this for a very long time. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of my friends in New York, when I first met her, I was so startled by this. But every time she meets a woman or a man, the first question she says is, what do you do? And I love that, because I think that a lot of women think that you're not supposed to ask questions like that. But what we do is such a big part of our identity, and it does help someone get to know you, and there's no reason not to ask. And I've even taught my husband to start asking that question to women, because one thing I noticed, I went to my kindergarten new parents night last year, and I noticed that not one man I met at that new parents night asked me what I did. But they all asked the dads what they did. Mm. And so I said to my husband, please never be that dad.
Right.
He said, but it's awkward, because so often when I ask, the woman will say, well, I'm home with kids. And so I say, well, that's your opportunity to then say, well, then what did you used to do? Because everyone used to have a job. And so that's what he does now. But it really takes training that it's okay. Ask every woman what they do, and you will find just endless stories and interests.
And I think it's, as you mentioned, it's sort of an education on both sides for the men who ask the question, and then for the women, as you mentioned earlier, what your response is. Because if you do end it with, oh, I'm just home with the kids, then it sort of leaves the conversation there for the men who don't know to ask that follow-up question.
Right. So it's like train them to ask the question and then ask the follow-up, because so many men are just so terrified of asking because they're afraid that they don't work, that they just don't ask at all.
Right. All right. I have a question, Samantha, for selfish reasons. One of the things that you talk about is relationships and the importance of looking for a partner, especially I'm talking about the space of entrepreneurs, looking for a partner who can help you in your business and not avoiding that piece of the pie. And I say it's selfish because I just did an episode about that, this idea of not going after a relationship or pursuing a relationship because I'm focused on the business. And I think a lot of us get caught up in that. I'm focused on this one piece of the pie, so everything else has to suffer. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and why that makes no sense? Help me out, Samantha.
So, and I love the selfish question. That's my favorite kind of question. So really, here's what I'm thinking is that, first of all, your relationship sets the tone for the rest of your life. So I've never seen any woman reach her potential who isn't either single or with someone who supports their dreams. Now, there is never a good time to have kids. There is never a good time to start, focusing on your relationship. But at the end of the day, the best time is right now, because you don't want to put things off. Things don't work in silos. And one of the reasons I love the pie method is because I want you to lie in bed at night and not just drown in the sorrow about your business or about your fight with your sister or about a health condition. By looking at all of those slices, it forces you to say, oh my gosh, but I've never been in better shape in my life, and I have a great set of friends. It forces you to look at the slices that are going well along with the slices that aren't. Now, the worst mistake an entrepreneur can make is to think that they don't have time to date. Because you have time for personal life. Everyone does. And in fact, it's going to make you stronger in your business if you spend some time on your personal life. Because whenever we do over focus on one slice, it's really unhealthy for everything, and that slice does not win in any way. So one of the best things you can do is know yourself and say, as an entrepreneur, you certainly need a partner who's going to support your dreams and be completely enthusiastic and not make you feel guilty when you're working late. But you probably also want a partner who says to you, you know what? You need to have a nice dinner every night. And so you can make time for 2 hours with me every night for dinner or for watching a TV show or whatever it is. And so that person actually will add to your life if they're the right person, but you have to approach finding them in the same way you would approach finding a job, which means you have to put a ton of work into it. And so, for example, if you're an entrepreneur and you're head down all the time working, you probably are going to need to go online, which is great because you now have more opportunities to date than ever before, and one night a week to start for your dating life. And every Thursday night or whatever it is, maybe it's twice a week, you're going to go on dates. And once you meet someone you like, you'll make even more time for it. But everyone has time for a partner. And when you look at the most successful women in the world, most of them have partners. And so it's the perfect time is now to find yours.
Thank you. I'll have to send you a check for that therapy session. Excellent.
I want an invitation to the wedding.
Exactly. Honestly, that was excellent advice. And I think a great way to think about it too, because as you said, knowing that you're going to have to put the work in and then making the decision to carve out a piece of your pie in order to do that. So if it's every Wednesday or every Thursday, that is date night. And then it pushes you, speaking for myself, it would push me to make an appointment, so to speak, to make that happen each week, as opposed to thinking of it as this arduous thing you have to take on in general dating.
And I would honestly, all entrepreneurs have some level of competitive nature in them. Mm-hmm. And so I actually think entrepreneurs are great at dating, because one of the things I used to do when I was dating, and I worked my ass off to meet my husband. Uh-huh. I really worked hard to meet him. Like, I went on so many bad dates before I got to him. And I think that one of the things I did was, on every date, my goal was to get asked out on the second date. So even if the date had 3 heads and I knew I was not interested, I would still put in so much effort to making the person ask me out again, because that's what kept me in the game. And sometimes you won't find out until dessert that you actually kind of like this person. So it keeps you in the game. And, maybe their brother or their sister is your soulmate, and, they'll set you up with them. Like, you never know. Every single person has some story to tell. And so keep engaged in that date the whole time, and go for the gold, and go for that second date, being asked out on that second date. And it just keeps it more like a sport, and it makes it fun.
So funny. I just did an episode about that because someone just said that to me last week about thinking about the second date. Because you never, you both could be nervous. And as you said, you might not know that you really like this person until you get to dessert, or they might get to know you and have other people. So this is confirmation from the universe through you that the second date is important.
Yeah. And by the way, if there's something about you, this person that really repels you, like they're
right, of course,
women or whatever it is, you don't need to go on the second date, but then the option is yours. So the reason I like you staying in the game through that first date is because then it's your choice as opposed to the other person's choice.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, now with the Pie Life, the book that you have, I know you also have the Pie Life Planner, which yes, and you're doing a campaign through I Fund Women, which I love. I love Karen and that whole team over there. But tell us about the Pie Life Planner and how that can support us too.
Well, I kept thinking, as I was on a 15-city book tour in the fall, and I was working with women all over the country. And one thing that kept coming up is, I wish you had a paper planner. And I've been someone who always loved my paper planner, like addicted to my paper planner. I loved writing different colors in it and just having my plans in my hands. And I think one of the things I've missed about my planner is, like, when you're on the phone, it's just not the same in terms of writing little notes. And I've never felt as organized as when I had a paper planner. And it turns out, when I investigated, that paper planners are growing enormously. So last year they grew 10%. And so I was like, you know what, this is perfect, because I can create the world's first motivational planner. Mm-hmm. And it's my first consumer product. And then I met Karen from I Fund Women, which is like, kind of like a Kickstarter for women.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, this is just the kick in the pants I need to actually get this off the ground. And so for the first time, I'm crowdfunding on I Fund Women for this planner, so people can pre-order the Pie Life Planner before I even place my big order, which is awesome. So it's been really great. It's been fun. And, crowdfunding is something I had no experience in, and it really takes on a life of its own. But I'm really, really excited about the product, and it's kind of made with moms in mind, to be honest. So I've always thought of my year as a school calendar, even before I had kids. Like, I never think of the year as January to December. I always think of the summer as the end of the year. So I made this planner with August 2017 to July 2018. So it's a school calendar year.
I love that.
Yeah.
Excellent. And how has it been with the crowdfunding? How has that experience been for you?
Well, I think when you're, and this as an entrepreneur, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, am I just asking people for favors all the time?
Right.
And so with crowdfunding, it's like you start with your friends, and you're suddenly asking your friends to order your, my planner is eventually going to be $40 to $50, but right now it's $30 if you order it on I Fund Women. So you're suddenly selling to your friends, and that can be a bit uncomfortable. But what I've also noticed is that if you get 1,000 people to pre-order your planner, and the ones that will expect a favor back. So even though I think it's the greatest product in the world and they're getting something in return, they feel like they're investing in a product they don't even know about. And so, sometimes your friends will immediately ask for a favor back. Like, sure, I'll buy your planner. And also, can you promote my new da-da-da-da? So, or I just came out with a book and I'd love for you to buy that. So what I found is I'm suddenly owing so many favors.
It becomes transactional.
It's a complete transaction. Yeah, it's a currency. And so it's really, really been interesting. But I love it, and I'm very goal oriented. So it's fun to see your campaign come to fruition. And I love the fact that I Fund Women is so female focused. It was a no-brainer for me to partner with them.
Excellent. And for everyone listening, I'll have a link, of course, to the planner and how you can support Samantha and her journey and all of those great things that she's creating. But I really love it. I took a look at it and just love it. Can't wait to get one. And I won't ask you for any favors. Well, you're here. This is a lovely favor for me. So A quote that I heard from you that I want to ask you about, you said, "There's no reason to give up parts of your life to have success in other parts. There's ways to have it all. You just have to redefine what all is," end quote. So I wanted to ask you, what is all for you?
For me, all is a life where I'm really engaging in multiple aspects of it. So for me, it's when I'm with my kids, completely focusing on my kids. When I'm at work, completely focusing at work. When I'm at lunch with a friend, really engaging with them. When I'm on date night, being present. But I am someone who I've learned over the course of the last 10 years to really pretty much eliminate most guilt from my life, which allows me to be present where I am. Because whenever you're feeling guilty, you're not present where you are. So I have learned to eliminate guilt and also embrace the fact that my life is going to be super messy. And, you know, I always say I make mistakes, multiple mistakes every day, but I try to laugh at them and realize that part of having a full, rich life means it's going to be messy. And one of the reasons I love the metaphor of the pie is because the most delicious pies are not the store-bought perfect-looking ones. They are the gooey, messy, dripping over the side ones. And that's how your life is supposed to look. And so I think that my life is super complete because I have that gooey, messy pie. And there's highs and lows in every day, but overall, it's a life of fulfillment.
I love it. Now, what would you say your support network looks like?
Well, I've had to really create my support network in the last 5 years. We moved to Los Angeles from New York with 0 friends and 0 family. And I remember filling out that emergency contact form at school, and I had no one to fill out that was on this coast. And so I immediately realized that I was going to have to make close friends for the sake of my family. And at the time, I had a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and a career, and my husband's career. So it was just an enormous transition. But I worked really hard to build a local support network because that's so critical. So I have that. And then, of course, I have my partner, and then my kids and my family. My brother, after a couple years after me, he and his wife moved with their kids to California. So that's enormous help and support network for me. And then also, I really think that there's Tori Johnson, who I love, has this great term called BBF, Business Best Friends. Mm-hmm. So there are women that I end up seeing more at conferences and on the road. And I do go to them with certain business issues or business problems, and we really try to support one another. So I think that's super important too. And then the other thing that I was really taught by Shasta Nelson, who's one of my favorites. She's a friendship expert. And she shared with me that we shed half of our friends every 7 years. And you'll hear a lot of busy women saying, "Oh my gosh, my friend well is full. I have no room for new friends." But that statistic alone should make you realize that the door should never be closed. There's always room for another contact, another friend. And so I think of my network as really fluid, and my support system is fluid and constantly changing. But I am someone who does assess, like, you know, my mom died last year very suddenly. And
I'm sorry.
Thank you. But it suddenly made me really look at sometimes those points in life. You know, I was divorced in my 20s, and those points in life where you struggle with something sometimes makes you reassess who your friends are and who are the friends that show up for you. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you really don't know until a crisis hits. So it makes you sometimes think, okay, if something went wrong, or if I really needed help in the middle of the night, who could you call? And if you don't have enough people on that list today, start building it tomorrow by, really also showing up for people, and then they show up for you.
And I think, as you said, it's so important to be self-aware in those moments as much as you can when you're going through a hard time of who shows up.
Absolutely. I really, really believe that.
Excellent. So in closing, Samantha, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be, and what would you say?
Oh my goodness, this is such a tough one. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think it would be my parents, who just instilled so much inner confidence in me. And it did make me feel like, I can turn any no into a yes. And I think that if there's something a gift I could give to my kids, it would be passing that same thing along.
Excellent. Now tell us how we can support you. As I said, I'll have links to everything, but tell everyone listening the ways that they can support you and find you on social media and find out more about all the great things you're creating.
Well, I do put together a weekly newsletter, and it comes out every Thursday, and you can sign up for it for free at samanthaettus.com. And then I also have my planner, as you know, on I Fund Women, and I have my book, The Pie Life, is now available in audio on Audible. So you can buy The Pie Life on Amazon or on audible.com.
Excellent. Samantha, thank you so much. And honestly, for my selfish question, I appreciate you indulging me in that.
Elayne, I've loved talking to you. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And before you go, just a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything.
It's about really going for what your dreams are and looking at what, not setting limits on your own dreams and really deciding that you're going to go for whatever it is. If it feels like a reach, then that should be your new goal. You really want to always aim as high as possible. And just to know that we all have bad moments or days when we wake up feeling not as good. And no, those are not necessarily the days to approach that, person that you're selling something to or to go after that opportunity. But give yourself a break on those days. Maybe they're filing days or days to get organized. And then the next day when you're feeling better, you really want to go for it. Because when you don't ask for what you want, the answer is always no. But when you ask for it, the answer could be yes.
Excellent. Samantha, thank you so much. Hold on for just a second. All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Samantha Ettus. Be sure to go to supportissexypodcast.com so you can find out more about Samantha and about The Pie Life. Now, in this rewind, Samantha talked about us balancing career and business and personal life and figuring out how it all works together. And one thing I want to offer you to support you is access to a free course that I just created, which I'm so excited about, on how to create your brand story. Now, whether you're an entrepreneur or a career woman, or you're trying to figure out someplace in between, maybe you're side hustling or you're thinking about it, you need a brand story. So I created a course called How to Create Your Unforgettable Brand Story. And you can find out about it at brandstory.tips. Again, brandstory.tips. Free course, enter your email, and you'll receive it right away. Okay, so make sure you have your brand story down, whether it's just for your own knowledge and vision. We talk about creating your vision around your brand story, but also so that you have it when you present it either on your website or when you're doing press, anything in the media. This will support you. So how to create your unforgettable brand story at brandstory.tips. All right, we have another great rewind for you tomorrow, so be sure to come back. And until next time, you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.